Welcome to the Book Faire Podcast. My name is Anthony, and this show is all about the freedom to read and children's literature. This week, we have an interview with returning guest Rosanne Parry, a collection of new middle grade releases, and news including the first example of the federal government banning books in public schools. First, let's begin with an interview with Rosanne Parry about her latest book, A Wolf Called Fire. Rosanne, welcome back to the podcast. How have you been?
Oh, my pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking. Just to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about A Wolf Called Fire? And for anybody who didn't hear the last interview, a bit about yourself as well? Sure. My name is Rosanne Parry, and I started out as a teacher, a job that I really loved. And I'm also a bookseller at an independent bookstore, but I am the author of, A Wolf Called Fire is my 11th book. And I've really come to love writing picture books and middle grade novels. And I have a special place in my heart for that middle grade reader. So I'm really happy to work in that space. And Green Willow has been a really great partner for me in making books that have both a fiction component and beautiful illustrations and some room in them for nonfiction at the end in the back matter. That makes it work really well for teachers to read out loud and really satisfying for families to read together. So I'm really loving the spot where I am in my writing life. And as for A Wolf Called Fire, so many young readers have written to me in the past 5 years, because A Wolf Called Wander was published 5 years ago, and said, "What happened to his brother? We loved his brother and he left his brother behind." And they have like all these questions, what happened? And so I love how much they cared about that character. And also when I went back and looked at new wolf research, I found there were things new that we've learned about wolf pack dynamics and how they work and live together. And one of the things that I really loved is that there isn't just one way to be an alpha wolf. I was inspired for this character, Worm, by Yellowstone Wolf 8. He was one of the original, in one of the original wolf packs that was brought to Yellowstone Park in 1995. And he was the smallest of his group of 4 pups. There were 4 male pups in this litter, and he was the littlest one. His other brothers were much bigger and handsomer and more charismatic, and they picked on him all the time. The park rangers were like, "Oh, is this little one gonna make it?" They were really worried about him because he was just relentlessly dominated by his brothers. And but he did survive that first year. About half of wolf pups in the wild don't make it to their first year, but he did survive that first year. And out of that experience, he seemed to find a sort of a well of compassion in himself, and a real talent for connecting with and mentoring young pups. So when he was going out on his own, he came across this other pack that was kind of in crisis. The female had given birth to 8 pups, which is a lot. And her alpha male had been killed by a poacher. And so she was alone trying to support all 8 of these pups and nurse them, and everything was really hard. And so 8 came along, and instead of trying to connect with the alpha female, he just sort of took on the pups and mentored them and taught them, wolves learn to hunt little things first, mice and voles and squirrels, and he taught them how to hunt little things. And he had a very relaxed and gentle and playful way with the pups, the result of which is that the alpha female saw how good he was for those pups, chose him as her alpha, and then those pups grew up to be much bigger than him, but fanatically loyal to him because he was such a good leader. And so he had this just completely different leadership style than you saw in most wolf packs, but
it resulted in him having a powerful pack because his pups were so devoted to him. They didn't disperse and join some other packs. They were like, we like it here. We are going to stay here. And they became very cohesive in the hunt. And when another pack challenged them to a fight, instead of fighting them and then killing the alpha of the opposing pack, which is usually how a fight ends between two wolf packs, the alpha is killed and then the pack disperses. Instead, this Yellowstone 8 chose to just fight until the alpha submitted to him. And then he would let that wolf run away. And the result was that wolf left with his whole pack. And then he was like, well, whatever we do, we're not ever going to go over there again. For sure, we're not going over there because that was awful. And so instead of having the pack just dispersed in disarray, they have a neighboring pack who's like, we are never crossing their territory again. So what looked maybe outwardly weak or merciful, right, ended up being a huge source of strength because they fought all these other packs into submission. Nobody muscled in on their territory, and he became the patriarch of the most powerful packs in Yellowstone for a decade. And other wolves after him copied some things about his leadership style, and it was just so. I just love that there was more than one way to be a leader, right? And more than one choice to make there. And I found that really inspiring. And Warm is the Omega wolf in his pack. And so I was like, oh, that would be an interesting place to go with that story, is to have this wolf, who I never really intended to be a main character, to have him come into his own and choose a leadership style that's different than what he learned from his father and what he learned from his brothers. So that was really fun to work on for me.
Right. And so all of this research that's going into it, you've brought up the main character Warm for a book called A Wolf Named Fire. Without spoiling too much, where does the name Fire come from?
Well, I think of it as his alpha name. There is a wildfire in the climax of the book, and he makes a sort of a big dramatic decision to protect his pack in this final scene. And I used something that I learned when I was a summer camp counselor in Mount Hood in Oregon. It was in the Mount Hood National Forest, and something I learned about how wildfires behave and what you do to protect children in a summer camp in a wildfire situation, and how to stay on ground that's already burned. So that was sort of the genesis of the end of the story. And so, yeah, Fire is his alpha name, just like Wander is Swift's alpha name. And so we just went with those for the title of the book.
Right. And that kind of shows how through writing, you're able to take childhood experiences with something as serious as wildfires, and you're able to take serious scientific research and you're able to just create stories like this. How important do you feel it is for children to be reading these kinds of stories, especially considering the fact that these are about wolves, which is something that is typically not it's something that's a little bit harder to emphasize with being a predatory animal.
Yeah. And there are some from some cultures really vilify wolves. Other cultures really honor wolves, right? And that's a whole other podcast about how that sort of culturally came about in different cultures. But what I love for my books is I want children to love the wilderness. I want them to feel a personal connection to the wilderness. Childhood is worldwide really more urban than it has ever been. And but I think human beings were just hardwired to protect what we love, right? And so I want children to love the wilderness, and I want them to feel a personal connection with it, right? And the truth is, bears Um, bears in the wilderness are a problem. Since 2020, I think they've killed like 18 people or something. Since the 1850s, when we started keeping organized records about it, since the 1850s, in all of North America, including all of Canada, the Yukon, Alaska, wolves have only killed people 4 times. And rabies was involved, I believe, in every instance of that, right? In more than 170 years, right? So wolves are not dangerous to people. We have hunted them for centuries, and they have remembered that about us. And so when people come around, wolves flee the situation reliably. Now that when wolves are collared and elk hunting season comes around, as soon as elk hunters are in the mountains, wolves are just gone completely for all of elk hunting season. The day elk hunting season is done, right back where they were. So yeah, they're not interested in conflict with people.
Right. So they're almost like it really just shows how they're just a part of the ecosystem where when the hunters come along, they just disappear because that's not what their environment typically is. Right?
Yeah, and there's nothing that they want from us. They've learned to fear us, and we don't have anything that they need. Right. There are plenty. I know people who live in Montana who are like, wolves pass through my property reliably a couple of times a day because I'm between excellent hunting ground over here and drinking water over there. So it's not like they're never around people, but they don't seek people. And so yeah, wolves aren't a danger to children, certainly not in the way that bears or mountain lions would be.
Right.
But I do want them to understand wolves and how their structure works, and I think understanding how that pack dynamic is enough removed from their own personal lives to give them a little bit of safe space to reflect on how is the sibling dynamic going in my own home pack, and what is my role there, and what choices do I have. Right, here are some choices these wolves have made, and what choices do I have in the particular pack I live in. I think sometimes having characters that are a little bit removed from the human sphere make it easier to reflect personally about them.
That's amazing. And the last time we spoke, I closed out with a very introspective question of how you view yourself as an author and the work that you do as a writer. And you mentioned that you think of your work as an invitation to the imagination of the reader, the gift and responsibility of writing what could possibly be the first novel for many young readers. And you even said that I sit down at my desk and I just imagine an open door. That's what I want for my readers, to have those doors to walk through their whole life long. I just want to say that it was a beautiful sentiment. I like to give the authors the last word, so I didn't want to build on that. Yeah. That's a beautiful sentiment. I agree with that purpose for reading entirely. And what I'd like to ask is, firstly, do you feel that today, even though this was only about 6 months ago, do you feel that today this still reflects how you approach writing? And probably more challenging to reflect on is, do you feel that the work you do is living up to what you want to present to young readers?
Oh, it's such a good question, and I'm grateful for it, because it is good to think about purpose in a deeper way. And I guess what I would add to that, and what I have been thinking about a lot lately, is the fundamental powerlessness of children in many ways, right? There are so many things in their life that they don't have a choice about. One of the things that I love about books is they are that open door that can take them in their imagination to a different place, a place that they couldn't physically take themselves, right? So I love that. I also love how much power writing gives children. It is almost the only way a child can stand on equal footing with an adult, is their ability to observe what is happening in their community and show up at public meetings and speak about it and write to their congressmen and their governors and their elected representatives and say, this is a problem, this is wrong, and this is what I think about it. And it is real power. One of the reasons that I wrote about Mustangs was because the person, Wild Horse Annie, who was the first sort of large-scale advocate for the conservation of America's wild Mustangs. When she first noticed, used to be able to kill them for sport and sell their bodies for dog food. That's terrible, right? But when she first wrote about it, adults did not care at all, but children cared a lot. When she wrote to her local newspaper and said, this is bad and it shouldn't be happening, children wrote back to her and said, what can we do? And when she realized how passionate children were about it, she started going from school to school to school all over the country and saying, this is what's happening, but it doesn't have to happen. We could make that change. And so they, thousands and thousands of children, as young as first graders, wrote to their congresspersons, the Department of the Interior, their governors, and said, this isn't right. These horses deserve better from us. The Wild and Free Roaming Horses and Burros Protection Act was passed in 1973. It's the only law I know of that was passed entirely on the advocacy of children. That's real power, right? And I want children to know that power for themselves, because we are in times that are frightening. And so I think that is valuable, right? There's an endurance to the written word that is valuable. And so that's what I hope for my readers, is not just that they read the book and love it and grow from it, but they realize that the written word can give them power. And really, especially in those years before they can vote, that's the most power a child can have, as far as I know. And that's what I'm hoping, is that they will see the possibility of the power of the written word and use it to do good things in their life.
And Rosanne, through your website, through people sending you emails or letters, or just speaking with children at schools, going back to that initial question and the point of giving children those doors to walk through their whole life long, do you see the effects of that, and do you feel that you are, to the best of your ability, providing that service as a writer?
I hope so. I do hear from children, and I hear from parents and grandparents too, who are like, ooh, I thought this kid would never catch on to reading, but this is the book that did it for them. And this is the book that I've read over and over and over again. Every now and then somebody will be signing, and usually they buy a new book, but every now and then some kid comes up with a book and the pages are all ruffled and, like they've been left out in the rain, and you open it up and cookie crumbs fall out. And I'm like, yes, that is the best book of all, a book that they've not just read, but read over and over and loved and carted it around with them. And it is quite dirty and smelly, but I love that book best of all because it's really meant so much in their life. And so to write a book that speaks to a child that way, that is a huge honor. And I'm delighted that has been true for some children.
Thank you. And I would definitely encourage any young readers or educators, reach out to authors, reach out to people to let them know that their messages are being heard.
Yeah.
Is there a preferred way you'd like for people to reach out to you, Rosanne?
Yeah. The best way probably to reach me is on my website. I have the address of the bookstore where I work. And so that's where I take fan mail, is a bookstore. And so children or classrooms, they can write to me there. Also, if you would like a signed and personalized copy, because I'm in the bookstore every single week, you can just either by phone or by the website order a book and ask for it to be signed, and I'll sign it in the next day or two, and we ship anywhere in the United States. So I'm happy to do that there too. So Annie Bloom's bookstore is the shop, and it's on my website, so it's pretty easy to find.
All right. Thank you very much. That has been an interview with Rosanne Parry. Her latest book, A Wolf Called Fire, is available now wherever books are sold. You can also find more about Rosanne and her series Voice of the Wild at rosanneparry.com or on Instagram at Rosanne.Parry. Coming next, a look at new books out this week. But first, if you enjoy the work being done on the Book Faire podcast, you can show your support by simply rating or reviewing the podcast wherever you are listening now. On YouTube, you can like, comment, and subscribe. You can also follow the podcast on Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod, or go to patreon.com/thebookfair. This is the best place to find resources that are shared on the podcast, as I will always post direct links to patreon.com. You can follow for free. No payment is required to access those resources. The best way to support the podcast is to simply share it with a friend, a relative, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Now let's look at some highlights of recent releases, beginning with Brianna Banana, Helper of the Day by Lana Button, with illustrations by Suharu Agawa. Impulsive and enthusiastic, almost 9-year-old Brianna Ross, who reads as white and is depicted with banana yellow hair, thinks third grade is as stinky as old cat farts in this rewarding early reader chapter book that's reminiscent of Junie B. Jones. Everyone calls her Brianna Banana. Her mother says it's because it's a fun name to say. She has no friends in her class, and she gets in trouble daily because, quote, my mad happens so fast. Brianna is sure everything will change if she's declared Helper of the Day. Except new classmate Rumi is named Helper instead. When Brianna offers quiet, overwhelmed Rumi aid, the girls strike up a tentative friendship. But will their budding relationship survive a quest to return books to the upstairs library? Well-meaning Brianna's smart narration relates her struggles coping with family upheaval, bullying, and frequent communication snafus and misunderstandings with adults, as well as her yearning for a best friend. This book is recommended for ages 6 to 8. Next up, JoJo vs. Middle School, the first of a new series titled Team Awkward by Vida Bybee and Joy McCullough. On top of preparing to start 6th grade at Kagan Middle School, JoJo Lopez is struggling to adjust to a new family dynamic after moving in with her mother's well-known catfluencer boyfriend, Paul, aka Mr. Meow. And if this arrangement doesn't work out, JoJo, her brother, and her mother will return to the original plan, move to Texas to live with JoJo's abuelos. Despite all the changes, she's excited for her first day of middle school, but everything goes wrong, culminating in a mortifying situation that finds her in Kagan's forbidden hallway, where she encounters fellow classmates Leah, Ryan, and Izzy, all of whom have their own first-day horror stories. As the racially diverse tweens, challenges relating to perfectionism, busy home lives, and plain old bad luck, they're each aided by their new friends. Depictions of open communication and sincere, vulnerable friendship cultivated amid catastrophically laugh-out-loud misadventure offer maturing readers an exceptional model for what fulfilling friendships can look like. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up, Murder at the Museum by Alcédaire Beckett King. By donning a raincoat, beret, and bristly fake mustache and affecting a nebulous accent, 10-year-old Bonnie Montgomery assumes her alter ego, the gentleman detective Montgomery Bonbon. While touring Whittlington's Hornville Museum with her grandfather, a security guard is murdered within a locked turret room. With a wry aside regarding the circumstances, quote, a decent detective can hardly eat breakfast without finding a corpse in their cocoa flakes, Bonbon discovers a valuable Roman Britain eagle statue has also been stolen, and clashes with bumbling adult nemesis Inspector Parashanti Sands. The ensuing inquiry takes Bonbon and her sidekick grandfather to a church choir, a cemetery, and into rival village Whittling-on-Sea as she investigates museum employees, the wealthy Hornville family, and the history of the missing artifact, leading to a confrontational climax in the tradition of Agatha Christie. Comedian Beckett King's sparkling series-starting debut delivers constant laughs and witty rejoinders. Whimsical Edward Gorey Esquire black and white illustrations by Powell enhance this brilliantly crafted mystery's absurdist delight. This book is recommended for ages 9 to 12. And lastly, Skin by Ibi Zoboi. 15-year-old Marisol, a Sukuyant, or shape-shifting witch, turns into a flying fireball once a month and feeds on other people's life forces. She longs to escape her magical legacy and wishes she could have a different life. Far away from the monsters and myths back home in the Caribbean and trying to forge a new path in New York City. She and her mother eke out an existence working at a bakery owned by their boss and landlord, Jean-Pierre. Meanwhile, Genevieve, a 17-year-old black and white dancer living with a painful skin condition that keeps her up at night, struggles to juggle the demands of high school and her boyfriend Micah's jealousy. The arrival of a new nanny for her white father and stepmother's twin neighbors compels Genevieve to discover a hidden connection to her absent mother, her cultural roots, and Marisol. Using gripping verse, author Zoboi delves into each teen's inner turmoil, tackling themes of misogynoir, colorism, and immigration via complicated mother-daughter dynamics. The girls' shifting perspectives appear on altering sides of the book's pages, only combining once they meet. An ambiguous resolution rounds up this searing exploration of personal growth and self-discovery. This book is recommended for ages 13 and up. That concludes new releases. We'll be wrapping up the episode with some headlines and ending on more positive news, hopefully a trend going forward. First, how the federal government is now entering the ring of book bans. This news item starts with some important context. The Department of Defense Education Activity, or the DoDEA, is a branch of the Department of Defense that oversees education for military families and on military bases. There are 161 schools in 7 states, Guam, Puerto Rico, and 11 countries across the world, all funded by public tax dollars. With that stated, 2 recent executive orders were signed from President Donald Trump, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, and ending radical indoctrination in K-12 schooling. Following these 2 orders, there are reports of school administrators receiving a memo ordering the removal of lessons and books from school curriculum and library shelves in DoDEA schools. Some of the curriculum included removing comprehensive health skill courses, readings and lessons on immigration for 5th graders, and an entire unit on Black History Month for 6th graders. This is a gross overstep of the powers of the federal government, removing integral parts of the United States history, and of course, targeting LGBTQ+ material as expected with this administration. The verbiage of ending indoctrination implies that there are required materials pushing the quote-unquote trans agenda. One book pulled is Becoming Nicole by Amy Ellis Nutt, a book about a trans activist that was on a list of independent reading materials for advanced literacy courses. This means the book is 1, not mandatory, and 2, included in an advanced reading course for grades 6 through 12, so it is not even offered to all students. Another removal is a chapter on gender and sexuality taught in advanced placement psychology courses. In 2023, the Florida Department of Education tried to remove similar content but was unsuccessful. It remains to be seen if the schools under the DoDEA will comply with this removal or stand by the College Board's decision that these are integral parts of AP psychology and necessary for college readiness for students that are pursuing a degree in psychology. These orders from the DODEA have a compliance date of February 18th, or 2 weeks from the date the memo was issued. This is a common tactic with laws around removing books from library shelves, giving a short time frame to remove and review materials, leading to schools and library boards to simply pull anything that is included in complaints without review to save on resources. One school, Wiesbaden Middle School, located in Wiesbaden, Germany, has preemptively shut down the library, barring any books from being checked out to remain in compliance with the orders. Hopefully, we see schools and libraries doing what they can to ensure that students will still have access to library materials. Next, the latest development for the controversial proposed school voucher program in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott has been attempting to pass school choice for years, and now Senate Bill 2, relating to the establishment of an education savings account program, passed in the Senate last week. It included a number of amendments that would allocate $1 billion of public funding to students enrolled in accredited private schools. This would move funding away from publicly funded schools to privately funded institutions that do not have to comply to the same standards for enrollment, allowing them to deny admission to students at their own discretion, which opens the door for discrimination. One opponent of the bill, Senator Royce West from Dallas, said, "I've constantly heard you say in the past that we want to make certain to take care of the kids in disadvantaged schools first. This doesn't do that. This puts them into a group with everybody else, and if it's your luck of the draw, you may be able to get a scholarship, but if it's not, you don't get a scholarship." End quote. Senator Brendan Creighton refuted this claim, blaming the students for not thriving on a personal level and not being an issue with the school itself. Another opponent of the bill, Senator Roland Gutierrez from District 19 in San Antonio, pointed out safety concerns, saying, quote, "We know that school shootings happen in private schools as well. These private schools do not have to comply with anything that is a prerequisite of the School Safety Commission that we dropped over $100 million to make sure that our children are safe." End quote. While this bill passing the Senate is damning for public school funding, this is the 5th time a school choice bill has passed through Texas Senate, with the previous attempts all failing to pass the House of Representatives. School vouchers are unpopular and only benefit people that can afford tuition for private schools to begin with, and negatively impact public schools, especially those in poorer communities. Hopefully, this bill also fails on the House floor. Rounding out the news with something less depressing, Children's Book Council launches the Graphic Novel Advocate Award. Children's Book Council is a non-profit trade association of children's book publishers. They launched the Free Speech Award last year and now has introduced the Graphic Novel Advocate Award, an annual award celebrating individuals with an exemplary commitment and advancement for graphic novels as a literary source for children and teens. Reading directly from their website, this newly created award honors individuals who have been strong and passionate advocates for children's, middle grade, and young adult graphic novels, with a lifetime of dedication to promoting this format and its presence in classrooms, public and school libraries, and bookstores nationwide. This award further recognizes defenders of graphic novels against book bans, particularly those by LGBTQIA+ and BIPOC creators, who have been disproportionately targeted. Each year, the CBC Graphic Novel Committee reviews nominations submitted by CBC member publishers and selects up to 4 honorees. The committee then announces and promotes these honorees and invites them to speak about their accomplishments via a virtual call. Nominations for the 2026 awards are due this fall, and as part of their announcement, CBC has named 4 recipients for the 2025 award. The 4 honorees are Ava Volin, Supervising Children's Librarian from Alameda Free Library, California; Meg Lemke, Comics and Graphic Novels Reviews Editor for Publishers Weekly; Robin Brenner, Head of Reference and Programming from Woburn Public Library in Massachusetts; and Whitney Leopard, Executive Editor from Random House Graphic and Ink Pop. Nominations are currently not open for 2026, but if you have a librarian or educator that positively advocates for graphic novels as a form of literacy for young readers, be on the lookout for submissions to CBC Graphic Novel Advocate Award. This will conclude another episode of the Book Faire Podcast. Please remember that you can like, share, or comment wherever you're listening, such as Spotify or YouTube, or leave a review on your podcast host platform. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.